The bucket slipped from Grace's frozen fingers and shattered against the well stones. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying 3 weeks ago when the last neighbor slammed their door in her face. 7 years old, and she already knew what her dying mother feared most in Silver Creek. They were completely alone. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. From the ridge above, a man who'd buried his own daughter watched through the falling snow. And what he saw next would force him to make a choice he'd been running from for 4 long years. If you want to see how this story ends, subscribe to our channel and follow Grace's journey to the very last word. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The wind cut through Caleb Thornton like a blade made of ice. 4 years of drifting, and he still couldn't outrun the ghosts. Margaret's face in the morning light, little Rose's laugh echoing through empty rooms, the graves he'd dug with his own hands while neighbors stood back too afraid to touch the fever dead. His horse stumbled beneath him. "Easy, boy." Caleb's voice came out rough, broken from disuse. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken to another living soul. A week, 2. The gelding stumbled again. This time, it didn't recover. Caleb barely got his boots free before the animal went down hard sides, heaving foam freezing on its muzzle. "No, no, no, no!" He dropped to his knees in the snow, hands pressed against the horse's neck. The animal's eyes were already glazing over. Worked too hard, too long, too much cold, just like everything else Caleb touched. "I'm sorry." The words caught in his throat like broken glass. "God forgive me, I'm so sorry." The horse shuddered once and went still. Caleb stayed there longer than he should have. Snow piled on his shoulders, his hat, the dead animal's flank. The cold seeped through his coat, his skin, his bones. Part of him wanted to stay. Wanted to let the white silence take him the way it had taken his horse, the way the fever had taken Margaret and Rose. But his body wouldn't surrender. Not yet. He forced himself to stand, grabbed his saddlebags and rifle, started walking. No direction, no destination. Just forward. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. The storm thickened around him like a living thing, howling and clawing and hungry. He almost missed it. A sound beneath the wind. Thin. High. Desperate. Human. Caleb stopped dead, head turning. There it was again, coming from the valley below. A child's voice raw with exhaustion. "Please. Please wake up." He pushed forward, boots punching through the crust of snow, and crested a small rise. What he saw drove every thought of death from his mind. A little girl. Couldn't be more than 7 years old. Dark hair whipping in the wind, thin coat meant for autumn, not this killing cold. She was trying to drag someone through the snow. A man, older, gray-haired, leaving a dark red trail behind him. The girl's small arms were wrapped around the man's chest. Her boots dug into the snow, searching for purchase that wasn't there. She pulled with everything she had, moved him maybe an inch, then pulled again. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming anymore, just pulling. Again and again and again. Something cracked open inside Caleb's chest. Something he'd kept locked away for 4 years. He moved without thinking. Half running, half falling down the slope. The girl didn't see him until his shadow fell across her path. She spun around, placed herself between Caleb and the wounded man. Her chin came up. Her small hands balled into fists. "Don't you touch him." Caleb stopped, raised both hands, slowly showing empty palms. "I ain't gonna hurt him, little miss, or you. That's what they all say." Her voice shook, but her stance didn't waver. "That's what the men in town said before they did this to Uncle Josiah." Caleb's eyes dropped to the unconscious man. Older, maybe 60, with a bloody gash across his temple and a dark stain spreading across his shoulder. Bullet wound, close range, still bleeding. Who shot him? Don't matter. The girl's defiance hit Caleb like a physical blow. He's mine to protect now. Rose had been about this age when... He shoved the memory down hard. How far to home? The girl's eyes narrowed. Suspicious. Smart. Why? Because that man's gonna die in this snow if we don't get him warm. And you're gonna freeze right alongside him. Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe. Or hope. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. That way. She pointed toward a faint light in the distance. Our farm. Caleb knelt beside the wounded man, checking his pulse. Weak but steady. The bullet had gone through the shoulder, messy, but survivable if they stop the bleeding. I'm gonna carry him. You lead the way. He met her eyes. Can you do that? The girl studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were old, he realized. Too old for her small face. You ain't from town, she said finally. Not a question. No, miss, I ain't. Then I reckon you'll do. She turned and started trudging through the snow. Try to keep up, mister. Despite everything, the cold, the dead horse, the ghosts howling louder than the wind, Caleb felt his cracked lips twitch. Brave little thing. He lifted the wounded man over his shoulders and followed. Mama's sick too. The girl's voice drifted back through the swirling snow. They'd been walking for nearly 20 minutes, and she hadn't stopped talking. Caleb suspected she needed the sound of her own voice to keep moving. Been sick since Papa died. The doctor in town won't come out no more. Says we can't pay. Caleb said nothing, just walked. I get water from the well every day. For Mama, for Uncle Josiah, for the animals. She glanced back at him, her dark eyes searching. People in town see me, but they don't see me. You know, he knew. God help him, he knew. What's your name, little miss? Grace. Another glance. Grace Holloway. What's yours? Caleb. Caleb Thornton. That's a good name. She nodded seriously. Strong. You're gonna need to be strong, Mr. Caleb. My mama's got a shotgun, and she don't trust strangers. Smart woman. She's the smartest, and the bravest, and the prettiest. Grace's voice caught slightly. Even when she's sick, she just needs help is all. We all do. The light ahead grew stronger. A cabin took shape through the snow, small, sturdy, well-maintained despite obvious recent neglect. Smoke curled from the chimney. They were maybe 50 yards away when the front door burst open. A woman appeared in the doorway. Shotgun raised. Barrel pointed directly at Caleb's chest. Put him down. Her voice cut through the wind like a blade. Put him down and step away, or I'll drop you where you stand. Sarah Holloway had learned to recognize danger young. It had started when she was 5, watching her Cherokee mother read the intentions of white traders before they ever spoke a word. It had sharpened when she married Daniel, learning to see threats in shadows, lies in smiles, betrayal hiding behind handshakes. Now looking at the stranger holding Josiah's limp body. Every instinct screamed warning. He was big, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome before grief carved it into hard angles. His eyes were gray flat, revealing nothing. Dangerous eyes. But he lowered Josiah gently to the snow and stepped back without argument. His hands came up empty. Mama! Grace ran to her, wrapping small arms around Sarah's waist. Mama, don't shoot him. He helped me bring Uncle Josiah home. Sarah's grip on the shotgun didn't waver. Who are you? Name's Caleb Thornton, ma'am. Was passing through when the storm caught me. Heard your daughter calling for help. Passing through to where? Nowhere particular. A drifter, then. Sarah's jaw tightened. Drifters meant trouble, always had. But Josiah was bleeding. Josiah was dying. And this stranger had carried him through a blizzard instead of leaving him to freeze. Grace, get inside. But Mama, now. Grace obeyed reluctantly, casting worried looks back at both men. Sarah waited until the door closed before lowering the shotgun. Slightly. Not all the way. Never all the way. You said he helped you. Explain. Found your girl trying to drag him through the snow about half a mile east. The stranger's voice was steady, matter of fact. Man's been shot. Shoulder wound through and through. Pistol caliber, close range. He needs a doctor. Doctor won't come. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition, maybe. Then I'll do what I can, if you'll allow it. You a doctor? Was. Army surgeon during the war. And after. Sarah studied him. His hands were steady despite the cold. His voice was calm. He didn't beg, didn't wheedle, didn't try to charm. Just stood there waiting for her decision. You make one wrong move, she said slowly, and I'll put both barrels through your chest. We clear. Crystal, ma'am. She stepped aside, keeping the shotgun ready. Bring him in. The cabin's interior hit Caleb like a wave of warmth. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Simple furniture lovingly made. Clean despite the obvious strain the household was under. This was a home. A real home, maintained by people who cared. An unexpected ache settled in his throat. Put him on the table, Sarah directed. Grace fetched the whiskey from the cabinet. Clean cloth from the chest. Caleb laid Josiah down carefully, already cataloging the wounds. The shoulder was bad, but manageable. The head wound worried him more, could mean swelling bleeding inside the skull. I need hot water. And something to sterilize instruments. You got a knife, needle, and thread. Sarah produced them without hesitation. She moved efficiently, no wasted motion, no panic. Caleb had seen trained nurses with less composure. You've done this before. My husband taught me. Her voice was flat. He was a medic. Was. Past tense. Caleb didn't ask. He worked for the next hour cleaning the wounds, extracting fragments, stitching flesh back together. Sarah assisted without being asked, anticipating his needs before he spoke them. Grace watched from the corner, clutching a ragged doll, silent but alert. When Caleb finally stepped back, Josiah's breathing had steadied. Color was returning to his weathered face. He'll live, Caleb said, assuming no infection sets in. Sarah exhaled slowly. Her hands were shaking now, first time they'd trembled all night. Thank you. The words seemed to cost her something. Thank you. Your husband taught you well. Something shuddered in her face. He taught me a lot of things. Grace emerged from her corner, approaching the makeshift bed. She took Josiah's hand gently, her small fingers wrapping around his larger ones. Uncle Josiah, can you hear me? The old man stirred, eyes fluttering. Grace, that you little bird. I'm here. You're home. You're safe. A weak smile crossed Josiah's face. Knew you'd save me. Just like your papa would have. Grace's chin wobbled, but she didn't cry. Rest now. Mama and Mr. Caleb are taking care of everything. Josiah's eyes found Caleb. Something sharpened in them despite the pain and exhaustion. Recognition. Assessment. Thornton, the old man said slowly. Where do I know that name? Rest. Sarah's voice was firm. Questions can wait. But her eyes had gone wary again, fixed on Caleb with renewed suspicion. They didn't offer him a bed. Sarah made that clear without saying it directly. He could stay by the fire, she said, until the storm passed. Then he'd be on his way. Caleb didn't argue, didn't have standing to argue. He was a stranger in their home, and they'd already given him more trust than was wise. He sat by the hearth after everyone else had retired, watching the flames dance, listening to the wind howl outside. His thoughts drifted where they always drifted when he let his guard down. Margaret laughing in their kitchen. Rose running through summer grass wildflowers, tangled in her hair. The last letter he'd received. The one that arrived 3 days too late. Come home. Something is wrong. Please come home. You ain't sleeping. Caleb looked up. Grace stood in the doorway of the small alcove where she slept with her mother. A blanket too big for her small frame was wrapped around her shoulders. "Neither are you, little miss. I don't sleep much anymore." She padded over, settling on the floor near him with the unself-consciousness of childhood. "Bad dreams." "About what?" Grace was quiet for a moment. Then, "About Papa, about the well, about things that haven't happened yet." Caleb studied her carefully. "Things that haven't happened. Mama says I imagine things. Maybe I do." Grace pulled her blanket tighter. "But I saw you coming, Mr. Caleb. 3 days ago I drew a picture of a man carrying Uncle Josiah through the snow. Mama thought it was just a story." A chill ran down Caleb's spine that had nothing to do with the winter outside. "What else have you drawn?" Grace's old young eyes met his. "The bad men, the ones who hurt Papa." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're coming back soon." "How soon?" "I don't know, but I feel it." She pressed a small hand to her chest. "In here. It gets tight when something bad is close." Caleb was a practical man, a man of medicine and evidence. He didn't believe in visions or premonitions, or things that couldn't be explained by science. But looking at this child, at the certainty in her eyes, "What happened to your Papa, Grace?" "They said he fell in the well, hit his head on the stones." Her voice went flat, hollow. "But that's not what I saw. In my dream, someone pushed him. Someone with a mean smile." "Did you tell your mama?" "She doesn't believe me." Grace's chin trembled. "Nobody does. But I know what I saw, Mr. Caleb. I know what's true." Caleb thought about all the things he knew to be true. The bodies he'd buried. The graves he couldn't visit. The ghosts he couldn't escape. "I believe you," he said quietly. Grace's whole body sagged with relief. She leaned against his arm, small and warm and trusting in a way he didn't deserve. "I knew you would," she whispered. "I saw that too." They sat together in the firelight, the storm raging outside, while somewhere in the darkness, danger crept closer. Morning came gray and still. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by white. Caleb stood on the cabin's small porch, assessing his situation. No horse. Supplies limited. Nearest town at least a day's walk through waist-deep snow. And behind him, a wounded man, a sick woman, and a child who saw things she shouldn't be able to see. The smart thing would be to leave. Find his way to Silver Creek. Get another horse. Keep moving. Whatever trouble this family was tangled in, it wasn't his concern. The door opened behind him. Sarah emerged, shotgun absent for the first time since he'd arrived. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, shoulders carrying weight no woman should bear alone. But her spine was straight, her chin lifted. "Josiah's awake, asking for you." Her voice was carefully neutral. "Says he needs to talk. Says it's important." Inside, Josiah had managed to prop himself against the pillows. His color was better, but pain lined every crease of his weathered face. "Close the door," the old man said. "What I got to say ain't for tender ears." Sarah's expression tightened, but she complied, sending Grace to check on the animals. When the door shut, Josiah fixed Caleb with a penetrating stare. "I know who you are, Thornton." Caleb went very still. "Took me a while to place it. Fever does that. Muddles the brain." Josiah's eyes were sharp despite his weakness. "You're the marshal who hunted Ezekiel Crane. The one who almost caught him before you disappeared 5 years back." The name hit Caleb like a fist to the gut. Ezekiel Crane. The outlaw who'd fed him false information. The man who'd drawn him away from home while his family died. "That man's dead." Caleb's voice came out flat, cold. "So is the marshal who hunted him." "Dead men don't bleed." Josiah nodded toward Caleb's hands, still stained with his blood. "Dead men don't save strangers in snowstorms. What do you want?" Josiah glanced at Sarah, then back to Caleb, Something heavy passed between them. Daniel Holloway, Sarah's husband, Grace's papa, he was a treasury agent, investigating Crane's money laundering operation. Josiah paused, letting that sink in. He got too close, found connections nobody was supposed to find. And then, he had an accident at the well. Sarah made a small sound, her hand pressed against her mouth. You knew. Her voice cracked like breaking ice. All this time you knew it wasn't an accident. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you, Sarah girl. You and Grace. Daniel made me promise. Daniel is dead. Sarah's voice rose sharply. They murdered him, and you let me believe. You let me think. Because the truth would have gotten you killed too. The room fell silent, except for the crackle of the fire. Caleb processed the information rapidly. Treasury agent, Ezekiel Crane, money laundering, murder disguised as an accident. Who's behind it locally? Josiah's jaw tightened. Man named Clayton Mercer. Owns the bank in Silver Creek. Half the businesses, most of the law. He's been partnered with Crane for years, cleaning dirty money through legitimate channels. And he wants this land. More than wants, needs. The water rights on this property control the whole valley. He's planning to dam the river force out the small ranchers, buy up everything cheap. Josiah's voice hardened. Daniel was gathering evidence to bring them both down. Died before he could finish. Sarah had sunk into a chair. Her face was pale. Her hands gripped the armrests like she might fly apart if she let go. The men who shot you, she said quietly. They were Mercers. Found me on the North Road. Knew I was bringing supplies, maybe information. Josiah managed a grim smile. They wanted to know what Daniel told me, where he hid his evidence. I didn't tell them nothing, but they'll be back, and next time they'll come for you. Caleb looked at Sarah, at her proud, devastated face, at her trembling hands trying so hard to be steady. Then he looked at the door, thinking of Grace outside. A child with visions she couldn't explain, whose father had been murdered, who saw danger coming. He should leave. This wasn't his fight. These weren't his people. But Rose had been 7 when she died, the same age as Grace, the same fierce bravery, and Caleb was so goddamn tired of running. The evidence Daniel gathered. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Do you know where it is? Josiah shook his head. He was careful. Told me it was hidden somewhere on the property. Said if anything happened to him, the land itself would tell the truth. Never explained what that meant. Sarah stood abruptly, moved to the window. Her voice was barely audible. Grace. Her drawings. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She's been dreaming about Daniel since he died, drawing pictures of things. I thought she was traumatized, inventing stories. Sarah's breath fogged the window. But what if she actually saw something? What if she knows where Daniel hid the evidence? Sarah, Josiah said gently, the child's been through enough. The child's going to be murdered if Mercer gets what he wants. Sarah turned, and her eyes were blazing now. Dark fire in dark depths. I won't lose her too. I won't lose anyone else to that monster. She crossed to Caleb, stopped directly in front of him. You were a marshal. You hunted men like Crane, like Mercer. You know how they think, how they operate. That was a long time ago. I don't care. Sarah's voice shook with intensity. My husband is dead. This man, she gestured at Josiah, nearly died bringing us supplies. My daughter sees nightmares every time she closes her eyes, and no one in that godforsaken town will lift a finger to help because Mercer owns them all. She drew a breath, steadied herself. Stay. Help me find Daniel's evidence. Help me destroy the people who killed him. And in return, I'll give you whatever you need. Food, shelter, money when this is over. Caleb looked into her storm-cloud eyes and saw something he recognized. The same desperate determination he'd felt when he buried his family. the same refusal to surrender, even when surrender made sense. You don't know me, don't know what I've done, what I failed to do. No. Sarah's chin lifted. But my daughter trusts you. And Grace. Her voice cracked slightly. Grace doesn't trust anyone anymore. Hasn't since her father died. Outside, through the window, Caleb could see the child returning from the barn. She moved carefully through the snow, a bucket of feed in her small hands, golden light catching the dark waves of her hair. She looked up suddenly, as if sensing his gaze, and she smiled. It hit him like a bullet, like a memory, like a promise. I'll stay, he heard himself say, until this is finished, until they're safe. Sarah exhaled slowly, some of the tension drained from her shoulders. Thank you. Josiah watched them both with knowing eyes. You're making a dangerous choice, Thornton. Mercer has men, money, the law on his side. What do we have? Caleb thought about the badge he'd turned in, the oath he'd broken, the man he used to be before grief hollowed him out. We have the truth. The words surprised him. And we have each other. When had he started including himself in their number? The door burst open. Grace rushed in, cheeks pink from cold eyes bright with something that might have been hope. Mama, the storm cleared. She grabbed Caleb's hand without hesitation, tugging him toward the door. Can I show Mr. Caleb the property? Can I show him Papa's special places? Sarah looked at Caleb. Something passed between them, understanding alliance, the first fragile threads of trust. Yes, sweetheart. Show him everything. Grace beamed. Come on, Mr. Caleb. I want to show you where the water sings. Papa said the land keeps secrets there. Papa said if you listen close enough, the stones remember everything. Where the water sings. The stones remember. Caleb let the child lead him out into the blinding white morning, her small hand warm in his, her chatter filling the silence he'd carried for 4 long years. Behind them, Sarah watched from the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but her hand no longer reached for the shotgun. It was a beginning. And somewhere in the frozen distance, riding toward them through the aftermath of the storm, danger crept closer. Grace's hand tightened around Caleb's fingers as she led him past the barn. Papa used to bring me here every morning, before the bad thing happened. Her boots crunched through fresh snow. He said the land talks if you know how to listen. Caleb followed in silence, his eyes scanning the property. The farm was larger than he'd first realized. Rolling pastures buried under white, a frozen creek cutting through the eastern edge. There. Grace pointed toward a stone structure near the creek. That's the well. Where Papa... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Caleb studied the well from a distance. Simple construction. Solid stonework. The kind of well a man could maintain for decades without trouble. The kind of well a man wouldn't accidentally fall into. You don't have to go closer. Not if you don't want to. Grace shook her head. I go there every day, for Mama. She can't carry the buckets no more. Not since she got sick. Her chin lifted. I ain't afraid of stones and water, Mr. Caleb. I'm afraid of the people who hurt Papa. 7 years old, and already she understood that the real monsters wore human faces. They walked together toward the well. As they approached, Grace's grip on his hand tightened further. This is where I was when you found me with Uncle Josiah. I was coming back from getting water. Heard the shot. Found him bleeding in the snow. You were brave. I was scared. She looked up at him with those old young eyes. Being brave and being scared is the same thing, ain't it? Papa told me that once. Your papa was a wise man. They reached the well. Caleb ran his hand along the cold stones, examining the structure. No obvious signs of damage. No loose stones that could cause a stumble. No ice buildup that might explain a fatal fall. Daniel Holloway hadn't fallen. He'd been pushed. Or struck. Or both. Grace, do you remember what you dreamed about the night before your papa died? The girl's face went pale. Mama doesn't like when I talk about that. Your mama ain't here right now. It's just us. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I saw a man standing right where you're standing. He had a nice coat, nice boots, but his smile was wrong, like a snake pretending to be friendly. She shuddered. Papa was on the ground, not moving, and the man just looked at him, then walked away. Did you see his face? Not clear, just the smile, and his hands. Grace's eyes went distant, remembering. He had soft hands, clean, not working hands like Papa's or Uncle Josiah's. Soft hands, clean, the hands of a banker perhaps, or a man who paid others to do his dirty work. Grace, has your mama ever taken you to town to Silver Creek? Sometimes, before Papa died, not after. Her jaw tightened in an expression that reminded Caleb painfully of her mother. Mama says folks there ain't kind to us no more. Why not? Because of what Mama is, what I am. Grace met his eyes steadily. We got Cherokee blood. Some folks don't like that. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd seen that particular hatred before, seen what it could drive men to do. The man with the nice coat, the one in your dream. Have you ever seen him in town? Grace nodded slowly. He owns the bank. Mr. Mercer. He came to our farm once after Papa died, brought papers for Mama to sign, said he wanted to help us, buy our land so we wouldn't have to worry no more. What did your mama say? She told him to get off our property before she put a hole in his fancy suit. A ghost of a smile crossed Grace's face. He didn't look so friendly after that. Caleb almost smiled himself. Mr. Caleb. Grace tugged his sleeve. Can I show you something? Something secret? What kind of secret? My drawings, the ones Mama doesn't know about. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I hid them in the barn, in the place Papa showed me. His instincts sharpened. Show me. They made their way to the barn. Grace kept glancing back toward the cabin, making sure her mother wasn't watching. Inside, the building was cold, but sheltered from the wind. 2 horses shifted in their stalls. A milk cow lowed softly. Chickens clucked from their roost. Grace led him to a corner where old tools hung on wooden pegs. She reached behind a rusted plow blade and withdrew a small wooden box. Its surface was carved with simple flowers. Papa made this for me, for my birthday. Before he... She cleared her throat. I keep my secret things in here. She opened the box. Inside were dozens of folded papers, some yellowed with age, others fresh. Grace spread them across a hay bale, her small hands trembling slightly. These are my dreams. Caleb felt his breath catch. The drawings were crude, a child's work obviously, but unmistakable in their subjects. A man lying by a well, a dark figure walking away, a horse fallen in snow, another figure carrying someone toward a cabin, men with guns approaching a farmhouse, a badge star-shaped lying in dirt, and one that made his blood run cold. A grave. 3 headstones. A man kneeling before them, head bowed. His grave. His family's graves. His silhouette perfectly captured despite the simple lines. When did you draw this? His voice came out rough, broken. Last week, before you came. Grace watched him with those knowing eyes. That's you, ain't it? Those are your people. Caleb couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I'm sorry, Mr. Caleb. Grace's small hand found his again. I know what it feels like, when the people you love go away and don't come back. He should say something, should comfort her maybe, or ask more questions about her visions. But the words wouldn't come. 4 years of running and a child's drawing had found him, seen him, known him. There's more. Grace shuffled through the papers, pulling out a fresher drawing. I made this one last night, after you saved Uncle Josiah. The image showed the interior of a barn. This barn, Caleb realized. A figure was lifting floorboards near the back wall. Beneath the boards, something gleamed. "What is that?" "I don't know, but Papa's there." She pointed to a shadowy figure standing beside the kneeling man. "See, he's showing somebody where to look." Caleb stared at the drawing. Daniel Holloway dead these 14 months, appearing in his daughter's dreams to reveal hidden secrets. Either the child was touched by something beyond ordinary understanding, or she'd seen something real before her father died. Something she didn't consciously remember, but that lived on in her dreams. Either way, those floorboards in the back of the barn were worth investigating. "Grace, can you keep a secret?" She nodded solemnly. "I keep lots of secrets." "Don't tell your mama about this drawing. Not yet. I want to look first. See if there's anything there." He met her eyes. "Can you do that for me?" "Yes, Mr. Caleb." She began gathering her papers, returning them to the box. "But you should know something." "What's that?" "The bad men in my drawings. The ones with guns." Grace met his eyes, and for a moment she looked ancient, timeless, like the land itself. "They're coming soon. Real soon. And there's more of them than you think." Before Caleb could respond, the barn door banged open. Sarah stood in the doorway, shotgun in hand, fury blazing in her dark eyes. "Grace Holloway, get in the house, now." The girl flinched but didn't argue. She grabbed her box and ran past her mother, pausing only to squeeze Caleb's hand one last time. Sarah waited until her daughter was out of earshot before advancing on Caleb. "What were you doing with my child alone?" "She was showing me the property, like you said. In the barn, whispering, looking at papers." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "I may have agreed to let you stay, Mr. Thornton, but that doesn't give you the right to interrogate my daughter." "I wasn't interrogating her." "Then what would you call it?" "Listening." Caleb held her gaze. "Something it seems she doesn't get much of." Sarah's face went white. "How dare you?" "She sees things, Mrs. Holloway. Things she shouldn't be able to see. Things that come true." Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She drew a picture of me arriving with Josiah 3 days before it happened. She drew her father's death before he died, and she's seeing more danger coming. Men with guns." Sarah's shotgun wavered slightly. "She's a child, a traumatized child with an overactive imagination. She drew my family's graves." The words came out harsher than Caleb intended. "In Colorado, where I buried my wife and daughter 4 years ago. She's never been to Colorado, never knew me before yesterday. How do you explain that?" The color drained from Sarah's face completely. She lowered the shotgun. Her hands were shaking. That's not possible." And yet. They stood in silence, the cold air thick between them. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel's mother had it. The site, she called it. Ran in the family on the Cherokee side. Daniel thought—" She swallowed hard. "He thought Grace might have inherited it. I didn't want to believe him. Didn't want our daughter to carry that burden." "It's not a burden if it's used right. If it's believed." Sarah's eyes snapped to his. "You believe her. A stranger who's known her less than a day believes her when I—" She couldn't finish. Her shoulders began to shake, and suddenly she wasn't a fierce frontier woman with a shotgun anymore. She was a mother who'd lost her husband, watched her daughter suffer, and denied her child's truth because the alternative was too frightening to accept. Caleb did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He reached out, gently took the shotgun from her shaking grasp, set it aside. Then he stood there, solid, present, while Sarah Holloway broke apart. She didn't cry loudly, didn't sob or wail, just silent tears streaming down her face as her body shook with suppressed grief. "I failed her." Her voice was raw. "My baby sees nightmares every night, and I told her they weren't real. I made her think she was broken." "You were scared. Scared parents make mistakes." "That's not an excuse." "No, but it's human. Sarah drew a shuddering breath, wiped her face with the back of her hand. When she looked at him again, something had shifted in her expression. The suspicion was still there, but tempered now by something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You've lost children. A daughter, Emma. She was 7. The same age as Grace. And my wife, Margaret. The fever took them both while I was... Caleb's jaw tightened. Away. Chasing a man who didn't want to be caught. Ezekiel Crane. Sarah's voice was quiet. Josiah told me enough. She retrieved her shotgun, but held it loosely now, pointed at the ground. You blame yourself. I am to blame. No. Her voice sharpened. Men like Crane are to blame. Men like Mercer. They make the choices. Do the damage. The rest of us are just trying to survive. She started toward the barn door, then stopped. Spoke without turning around. Grace's drawings, the ones she showed you. Was there anything about Daniel, about where he might have hidden his evidence? Caleb hesitated only a moment. Trust had to start somewhere. There might be, in the barn, under the floorboards. Sarah turned slowly. Her eyes searched his face. You're sure? Grace is sure, and I'm starting to think that's enough. She absorbed this for a long moment, then nodded once sharply. Tonight, after Grace is asleep, we look together. She walked out into the snow, leaving Caleb alone with the horses and the dust and a box of drawings that showed the future. The afternoon passed slowly. Caleb helped with chores, repaired a broken fence rail, hauled water, chopped wood, physical labor that let him think while his hands stayed busy. Sarah kept her distance, but the hostility had faded. She watched him sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, measuring him against some internal standard only she understood. Josiah slept most of the day, his body healing from the gunshot wound. But when Caleb checked on him in late afternoon, the old man was awake, staring at the ceiling. Heard you and Sarah talking earlier. Josiah's voice was weak but clear. Through the walls. You hear anything useful? Heard you tell her about Grace's gift. Josiah's eyes found his. Daniel would have liked you. He was practical, too. Didn't waste time denying what was right in front of him. Tell me about him, about what he was investigating. Josiah shifted, wincing at the pull of his stitches. Started 3 years back. Treasury got wind of money moving through the territory. Large sums with no clear source. Daniel traced it to a shell company called Western Resource Management. Paperwork led to Clayton Mercer. Josiah paused. And Mercer's connected to Crane. More than connected. Partners. How does it work? Crane provides the dirty money. Bank robberies. Cattle rustling. Protection rackets. Mercer cleans it through legitimate channels. Land purchases. Business investments. Loans. Josiah's voice dropped. Perfect system, long as nobody looks too close. But Daniel looked. Daniel did more than look. He got inside. Posed as an investor. Gained Mercer's trust. Found ledgers. Transaction records. Proof of every dirty dollar that passed through that bank. Josiah's eyes hardened. Then someone talked. We still don't know who. But Mercer found out Daniel was a federal man. And a week later, Daniel was dead at the bottom of that well. Caleb processed this. The evidence Daniel gathered. Where was it hidden? He never told you exactly where. Said if anything happened to him, he'd leave signs for Sarah. Clues she'd understand, but no one else would. Josiah attempted a weak smile. Where the water sings and the stones remember. That's what he told me once. Grace mentioned something like that. Said Daniel told her the land keeps secrets. Josiah's eyes widened. Lord above that little girl. Daniel always said she was special. Said she'd be the one to finish what he started if things went wrong. She's 7 years old, Josiah. And she sees truth when the rest of us are blind. The old man's voice grew urgent. Listen to me, Thornton. Whatever's hidden on this property, you need to find it before Mercer does. He's getting desperate. The dam project he's planning needs this land. Without the water rights, his whole scheme falls apart. What dam project? Sarah didn't mention any dam. Mercer wants to dam the river upstream, claims it's for the town's benefit, but the real plan is to flood the valley during spring melt. Destroy the small ranches, buy up the land for pennies. Josiah gripped Caleb's arm with surprising strength. Only this farm sits right where the dam needs to be. Sarah won't sell, so he's trying to force her out, killing her husband, threatening her family, whatever it takes. And the people in town, they just go along with it. Most of them are scared, the rest are bought. Josiah's grip tightened. Daniel died protecting the truth. Don't let his sacrifice be wasted. The door opened. Sarah entered with a bowl of broth, her expression guarded. He needs to rest. Her eyes met Caleb's. So do you. Tonight's going to be long. Caleb nodded, rising. As he passed Sarah, she caught his sleeve. My daughter. Her voice was barely audible. If her gift is real, if she truly sees what's coming. Sarah's voice faltered. Teach her. Help her understand it. I can't. I don't know how. You believe her. That's a start. That's more than I gave her for 14 months. Sarah released his sleeve, turning away. That's more than she deserved from her own mother. The words hung in the air as Caleb left the room, heavy with regret, and something that might have been the beginning of hope. Night fell hard and fast. Grace went to bed without argument, exhausted from the day's emotions. Sarah tucked her in, smoothing dark hair from her forehead, whispering words too soft for Caleb to hear. When she emerged, her face was set with determination. Let's go. They crossed to the barn in darkness, their breath visible in the frigid air. Sarah carried a lantern, its flame flickering against the wind. Caleb had his revolver more from habit than expectation. Inside, the animals shifted restlessly, sensing the tension. Sarah held up the lantern, illuminating the back corner Grace's drawing had shown. Old hay covered the floor. Unused equipment gathered dust. Nothing remarkable, nothing obvious. But Sarah was already kneeling, running her hands along the wooden planks. Daniel and I built this barn together, the summer after Grace was born. Her fingers found something, a slight irregularity in the wood. I know every board, every nail. She pried at it. A section of floorboard lifted free. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather satchel. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted it. Inside were papers, dozens of them. Ledgers, photographs, documents covered in Daniel's careful handwriting. Dear God, her voice shook. He really did it. He found everything. Caleb took the lantern, holding it closer as Sarah spread the papers across a hay bale. The evidence was damning. Financial records showing deposits from sources that didn't exist. Photographs of Mercer meeting with men Caleb recognized from wanted posters. A detailed journal describing everything Daniel had uncovered, names, dates, amounts. This is enough to hang them, Caleb said quietly. Mercer, Crane, everyone connected. But who do we take it to? Sarah's voice was bitter. The sheriff works for Mercer. The judge plays poker with him every Friday. There's no one in Silver Creek we can trust. Then we go higher. Federal marshals in Cheyenne. That's 4 days' ride in good weather. In winter. Sarah shook her head. We'd never make it. Not with Grace. Not with Josiah wounded. Then we make it or we die trying. Sarah looked at him sharply. You'd risk your life for us. For strangers. You're not strangers. The words came out before Caleb could stop them. Not anymore. Something passed between them in the lantern light. Recognition of shared purpose. The first trembling threads of something neither was ready to name. Before Sarah could respond, a sound cut through the silence. Hoofbeats. Distant but approaching fast. Caleb was moving before Sarah could speak. He reached the barn door, peering through a crack in the wood. In the moonlight, he counted 4 riders coming over the ridge. Get inside the house, now! Sarah didn't argue. She gathered the papers, shoving them back into the satchel, and ran toward the cabin. Caleb followed, his hand on his revolver, his eyes tracking the approaching riders. They reached the porch just as the horseman entered the yard. Sarah ducked inside. Caleb stayed on the porch, positioning himself between the door and the strangers. The lead rider stopped his horse 10 feet away. Even in the darkness, his expensive coat and polished boots were visible. Soft hands held the reins. A thin smile played on his lips. "Good evening." The voice was cultured, pleasant, wrong. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Clayton Mercer." Caleb's hand rested on his revolver, but he didn't draw. 4 against 1 were bad odds, and Sarah and Grace were inside. Any gunplay would put them in the crossfire. "Mr. Mercer, peculiar time for a social call." Mercer's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "I heard there was a stranger staying with the widow Holloway. Thought I'd introduce myself. Welcome you to our little community. Appreciate the hospitality, but Mrs. Holloway and her daughter are already asleep. Perhaps you could come back during daylight hours." Mercer made a motion to dismount. Caleb stepped forward, blocking the porch stairs. "I'm sure she wouldn't mind," Mercer said smoothly. "I'm sure she would." The air between them crackled with tension. Mercer's 3 companions shifted in their saddles' hands, moving toward their weapons. "You're protective of a woman you barely know." Mercer's head tilted. "Admirable. Or foolish. Time will tell which. Time tells everything eventually." "Indeed it does." Mercer settled back in his saddle, studying Caleb with renewed interest. "You're not a drifter, are you? I've seen drifters. They don't stand like you do, don't speak like you do." "I'm whatever I need to be." "A dangerous answer, Mr. I didn't catch your name." "Thornton, Caleb Thornton." Something flickered in Mercer's eyes. Recognition. Concern. It vanished too quickly to identify. "Thornton," he repeated slowly. "Can't say the name rings any bells, but then I meet so many people in my line of work. Banking must be fascinating." "It has its moments." Mercer gathered his reins, preparing to leave. "Do give my regards to Mrs. Holloway, and remind her that my offer still stands. This property, isolated as it is vulnerable as she is, accidents happen in winter. It would be a shame if something unfortunate occurred." "Is that a threat?" "Merely an observation." Mercer's smile never wavered. "Good night, Mr. Thornton. I suspect we'll be seeing each other again, soon." He wheeled his horse and rode into the darkness, his men following. Caleb watched until they disappeared over the ridge, before finally releasing his grip on the revolver. The cabin door opened behind him. "He knows." Sarah's voice was tight with fear. "He knows something's changed." "He suspects. There's a difference." "Not much of one." Sarah stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "We need to leave. Tonight." In the dark. With Josiah wounded and Grace half asleep, Mercer's men will be watching the roads. We'd never make it a mile. "Then what do you suggest?" Caleb turned to face her. "We wait until dawn. Travel light. Move fast. Head for the mountain pass instead of the main road. It's harder terrain, but less likely to be watched. And if they catch us, then we fight." Sarah stared at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "You make it sound simple." "Nothing about this is simple, but staying here means dying slow. Running means we at least have a chance." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel used to say the same thing. About chances. About fighting." Her eyes glistened in the moonlight. "He died anyway." "Daniel died protecting his family. Protecting the truth." Caleb moved closer, lowering his voice. "His death doesn't have to be meaningless, Sarah. The evidence we found can destroy Mercer. Bring down Crane. Give Grace a future where she doesn't have to be afraid. And if we fail, then we fail together. But at least we tried." Sarah closed her eyes, drew a shuddering breath. When she opened them again, the fear was still there. But something else had joined it. determination, resolve. Dawn, then. She turned toward the door, then paused. Caleb? It was the first time she'd used his given name. Yeah. Thank you. The words came out rough, reluctant. For believing her. For staying. For all of it. Don't thank me yet. We still have a long way to go. I know. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. But we're going together. That's more than I had yesterday. She disappeared inside. Caleb remained on the porch watching the empty darkness where Mercer had vanished. The banker knew something had changed. The question was how much time they had before he acted on that knowledge. Not much, Caleb suspected. Not much at all. Sleep came in fragments that night. Caleb dozed by the fire, his revolver within reach, jerking awake at every creak and whisper. Sarah packed silently in the darkness, moving between rooms like a ghost gathering essentials without waking Grace or disturbing Josiah. Around 3 a.m, a small voice broke the silence. Mr. Caleb. He opened his eyes. Grace stood beside him, her ragged doll clutched to her chest, her face pale in the dying firelight. Bad dream? She shook her head. Not a dream. A warning. Caleb sat up fully, instantly alert. What kind of warning? The Shadow Man. The one I told you about. Grace's voice trembled. He's here, in Silver Creek. He came last night. Who is he, Grace? Do you know his name? No. But he's worse than Mr. Mercer, much worse. Her small hand found his. He's been watching you, Mr. Caleb, for a long time. Even before you came here. The words sent ice through Caleb's veins. Watching me. In my dreams I see him watching you at those graves, the ones in Colorado. Grace's grip tightened. He stands behind the trees where you can't see him. But he's always there. He knows you. And he's coming for you. Ezekiel Crane. The name surfaced in Caleb's mind like a corpse rising from dark water. Crane had disappeared 5 years ago around the same time Caleb had abandoned his badge. Everyone assumed he was dead. But what if he wasn't? What if he'd simply gone underground working through proxies like Mercer waiting? Grace, this Shadow Man. Have you seen him do anything in your dreams? The girl nodded slowly. He talks to Mr. Mercer sometimes. Tells him what to do. Mr. Mercer is scared of him. She paused. Everyone's scared of him. What does he look like? Ordinary. Like nobody special. That's what makes him scary. Grace's eyes went distant. Papa's journal talks about him. The papers Mama found. There's a name in there. A name that doesn't match the face. What name? I don't remember exactly, but it starts with E like Ezra, but different. A name starting with E. A man who watched from shadows. A presence that terrified even men like Mercer. Thank you, Grace. You did good telling me this. Are we leaving? I heard Mama packing. At dawn. We're going somewhere safe. Cheyenne? Caleb blinked. How did you? I saw it. Grace managed a small smile. In my dream. We're on a train going fast. You and Mama and Uncle Josiah and me. We're together, and we stay together. Her smile faltered. Mostly. There's parts I can't see clear, foggy parts. She pressed closer to him. But we're alive. That's what matters, right? That's what matters. Caleb agreed. Grace surprised him by crawling into his lap, curling against his chest like she'd known him her whole life. Within minutes, she was asleep. Caleb sat motionless, afraid to disturb her, feeling her small heartbeat against his ribs. That absolute trust. He hadn't held a child like this since Emma. Hadn't felt that tiny warmth, that complete faith in what felt like a lifetime. He'd failed Emma, failed Margaret, failed everyone who'd ever depended on him. But maybe, just maybe, he could do better this time. Dawn came gray and bitter. Sarah had the wagon loaded by first light, their meager supplies hidden under blankets. Daniel's evidence secured in the satchel she wore strapped across her body. Josiah protested leaving, but he was too weak to argue effectively. Sarah and Caleb helped him into the wagon bed, propping him against sacks of grain, covering him with quilts. "This is a mistake," the old man muttered. "Should stand and fight." "We are fighting," Caleb replied. "Just not here." Grace climbed onto the wagon seat, unusually quiet. Her eyes scanned the horizon with an intensity that made Caleb's skin prickle. "They're not watching the North Road," she said softly. "Not yet, but they will be soon. We need to go now." Sarah exchanged a glance with Caleb. Neither questioned the child's certainty. The wagon lurched into motion, horses straining against the frozen ground. Caleb rode ahead, scouting while Sarah managed the reins. Behind them, the little cabin grew smaller and smaller until it vanished entirely. They were running now, running toward something, or running from everything. Caleb wasn't sure which. But for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't running alone. They traveled for 2 hours without incident. The mountain pass Sarah had suggested was treacherous. The trail narrow and slippery with ice. More than once, Caleb had to dismount and lead his horse on foot, testing the ground before letting the wagon follow. But they were making progress. The ridge ahead marked the boundary of the valley. Once they crossed it, they'd be out of Mercer's immediate territory. "How much farther?" Sarah called from the wagon. "Another mile to the ridge, then it's downhill toward—" A gunshot cracked through the morning air. Caleb felt the bullet whistle past his ear, a heartbeat before the sound registered. He threw himself from the saddle, hitting the snow hard, rolling toward a cluster of rocks. "Get down! Sarah! Get down!" More shots. Sarah yanked Grace off the wagon seat, sheltering her behind the wheels. In the wagon bed, Josiah struggled to rise, cursing his useless arm. Caleb counted muzzle flashes. 3 shooters, maybe 4, positioned on the ridge above them. Professional positioning, not random bandits. Mercer's men. "Thornton." A voice echoed down from the rocks. "We know you've got the papers. Hand them over and the woman and child go free." Sarah's eyes met Caleb's across the snow. Her hand pressed against the satchel at her side. "Don't even think about it," Caleb growled. "If it saves Grace." "It won't. You hand over those papers, we're all dead anyway." He checked his revolver. 6 shots. 3, maybe 4 targets. Not great odds, but not impossible either. Mercer can't afford witnesses. Stay down. No matter what happens, stay down and keep Grace quiet. "What are you going to do?" "Even the odds." Before she could protest, Caleb was moving. He scrambled along the rocks, keeping low, using the terrain for cover. The shooters had the high ground, but they'd made a mistake. They were bunched too close together, watching the wagon instead of their flanks. Caleb circled wide, climbing through a narrow gully that brought him above and behind their position. His boots found purchase on frozen stone. His breath came steady, controlled. 4 years of running, and his body still remembered how to hunt. He found the first shooter crouched behind a boulder rifle trained on the wagon below. The man never heard Caleb approach. One swift blow to the back of the head, and he crumpled without a sound. Caleb took his rifle, checked the ammunition. Full magazine. Good. 2 more shots from below. The remaining shooters were getting impatient. Caleb moved to the second position. This one was more alert, spinning at the last moment, but not fast enough. Caleb's fist connected with his jaw, followed by a knee to the gut. The man went down gasping. That left 2. "Jenkins Martinez." One of the remaining shooters had noticed the silence. "What's going on over there?" Caleb stepped into view, revolver raised rifle slung across his back. "Drop your weapons, now!" The man's eyes widened. His partner 20 feet away made the mistake of reaching for his pistol. Caleb fired twice. The first shot took the pistol from the man's hand. The second drove into his shoulder, spinning him around. "I said drop it!" The first shooter let his rifle fall, hands rising slowly. "You're making a mistake, Thornton." His voice shook, but defiance flickered in his eyes. "Mr. Mercer doesn't forget, doesn't forgive. Neither do I." Caleb collected their weapons, then sent both men stumbling down the opposite slope, with a warning that rang with deadly promise. "Tell Mercer we're coming for him. Tell him everything Daniel Holloway gathered is heading straight to the federal marshals." He paused. Let the words land. "And tell him Caleb Thornton remembers his wife and daughter every single day." The men ran. Caleb returned to the wagon to find Sarah and Grace huddled together. Josiah was sitting up with a pistol he'd found somewhere, his face gray with pain and determination. "Everyone all right?" Sarah nodded shakily. "You?" "Fine." Caleb swung onto his horse. "We need to move. Those men will report back. Mercer will send more. How many more can there be? As many as his money can buy." He kicked his horse forward. "Let's not wait to find out." They crossed the ridge as the sun reached its peak. The descent was easier than the climb, the trail widening as they left the mountain pass behind. By late afternoon, they'd reached a trading post at the junction of two roads. Caleb left the others hidden in a copse of trees while he approached alone. The trading post was small, a single building with a stable attached. Smoke rose from the chimney. A weathered sign proclaimed "Harper's Rest" in faded letters. Inside, a grizzled man looked up from behind a counter cluttered with goods. "Help you, stranger." "Need fresh horses. Supplies for a 4-day journey. Willing to pay fare." The man's eyes narrowed, taking in Caleb's trail-worn appearance, the revolver at his hip, the weariness in his stance. 4 days, headed to Cheyenne. Something like that. Lot of folks headed to Cheyenne lately, some of them in a powerful hurry. The trader leaned forward. Some of them asking questions about travelers. Families traveling with children. Caleb's hand moved imperceptibly toward his weapon. "What kind of questions?" "The paying kind." The trader smiled, revealing gaps where teeth should be. "But I ain't answered them yet. Man's got to have principles, don't he?" "Depends on the man." "True enough." The trader stood moving toward the back of his establishment. "I got horses. Supplies too. But it's gonna cost you more than fare. Danger tax, you might call it." "How much more?" "Double." The trader paused. "And a promise." "What kind of promise?" The trader turned back, his expression suddenly serious. "There's a woman and child with you, ain't there, and an old man wounded." Caleb said nothing. "Thought so. Word travels fast in these parts, even in winter." The trader's voice dropped. "I knew Daniel Holloway. Good man. Helped me out of a tight spot once, didn't ask for nothing in return. If that woman out there is his widow, and that child is his daughter?" "They are." The trader nodded slowly. "Then here's my promise. You get them to Cheyenne safe. You tell the marshals everything. You burn Mercer and his whole rotten operation to the ground. That's the plan. Then we got a deal." The trader extended his hand. "Name's Harper. Jacob Harper. And for what it's worth, I hope you make it." Caleb clasped the offered hand firmly. The simple gesture carried weight. A stranger choosing sides in a dangerous game. A small act of decency in a world that had shown him precious little of it lately. Maybe there was hope yet. An hour later, they were back on the trail. Fresh horses. Enough supplies to reach Cheyenne. Sarah drove the wagon, now her jaw set with determination, while Caleb scouted ahead. Grace sat beside her mother, unnaturally still, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. "Mama," the girl's voice was barely a whisper. "The Shadow Man knows we're coming. He's not in Silver Creek anymore." Sarah's hands tightened on the reins. "Where is he?" "Ahead of us, waiting." Grace's small body trembled. "He knows where we're going. He's always known." Caleb heard the exchange, slowing his horse until he rode alongside the wagon. "Grace, this Shadow Man. Can you see anything else about him? Where exactly he's waiting?" The girl closed her eyes, her face contorting with effort. "A building. Big. With lots of people. Official. Her eyes snapped open. The marshal's office. He's inside the marshal's office. Caleb felt the blood drain from his face. If Crane, or whoever this shadow man was, had infiltrated the federal marshals in Cheyenne, they were walking into a trap. Everything they'd risked, everything Daniel had died for, would be worthless. "We can't go to Cheyenne." Sarah's voice was hollow. "If they're waiting for us. We have to, but not to the marshal's office, not directly." "Then where?" Caleb's mind raced. Daniel's journal mentioned a judge, someone he trusted, a man named Hollister in Denver. Denver's another week's journey. "I know, but it's our only option." Sarah stared at him, exhaustion and fear warring in her dark eyes. "We don't have supplies for another week. The horses won't make it. Josiah won't make it." "Then we split up." The words hung in the cold air. "No." Sarah's voice cracked. "No, we stay together. You promised." "I promised to get you and Grace to safety. That's still the plan." Caleb moved his horse closer, his voice softening. "Listen to me. You take Grace and Josiah to Cheyenne. Find a hotel. Lay low. Don't contact anyone official. I'll ride to Denver alone. Faster without the wagon. Deliver the evidence to Judge Hollister. And if they catch you, they won't. You don't know that. You can't know that. Sarah." Caleb reached across his hand, covering hers on the reins. "I've been running for 4 years. Running from ghosts. Running from guilt. Running from everything that mattered." His grip tightened. "I'm done running. This is what I'm supposed to do. What I was meant for." "And what about us?" Sarah's voice broke. "What about Grace? She needs her mother. She needs to be safe. She needs a future where men like Mercer can't touch her." Caleb's voice roughened. "I can give her that. Let me give her that." For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Her eyes glistened. Her hands trembled on the reins. Then she pulled her hand free and struck him across the face. The blow wasn't hard, but Caleb felt it to his bones. "That's for thinking you get to make this choice alone." And then she grabbed his coat, pulled him toward her, and kissed him. It was brief and fierce and desperate, tasting of tears and cold air, and something that might have been the beginning of love. When she released him, her eyes were blazing. "That's for coming back, because you will come back, Caleb Thornton. You will come back to us, or I swear I will find you in whatever afterlife exists and make your eternity miserable." Despite everything, Caleb felt himself smile. "Yes, ma'am." "Mama." Grace's voice cut through the moment. "Mama, someone's coming." They turned. A lone rider was approaching from the north, moving fast, a dark shape against the white landscape. Caleb's hand found his revolver. Sarah grabbed the rifle from the wagon bed. The rider came closer, close enough to see details. A woman, riding like she'd been born in the saddle, her dark red hair streaming behind her. She pulled up 20 feet away, hands raised to show she meant no harm. "Looking for Caleb Thornton." Her voice was clear, carrying easily across the snow. "Jacob Harper sent me. Said you might need help getting to Denver." "Who are you?" The woman lowered her hands. A grim smile crossed her face. "Name's Catherine Sullivan. Most folks call me Kate. I write for the Cheyenne Tribune." She paused. "And I've been investigating Clayton Mercer for 2 years." Sarah's grip on the rifle didn't waver. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I have documents proving the federal marshal in Cheyenne is on Mercer's payroll. Because I know a safe route to Denver that bypasses all the watched roads." Kate's eyes found Caleb's. "And because Ezekiel Crane killed my brother 3 years ago. And I want to see that monster hang." Ezekiel Crane. The name hit Caleb like a physical blow. Crane's alive. Very much so. Going by a different name now. But yes, alive and pulling strings from the shadows. Kate's expression hardened. "You want to take him down? I'm your best chance." Caleb looked at Sarah, at Grace, at the long road stretching before them. Then he made his decision. "Tell me everything." Kate Sullivan rode beside them through the fading light, her voice low and urgent as she laid out everything she knew. Crane's been operating under the name Elijah Morrison for 3 years now. Respectable businessman on paper. Silent partner in half the banks between here and California. Her jaw tightened. Nobody suspects because nobody's looking. The wanted posters all say presumed dead. "How did you find out?" Caleb asked. "My brother Thomas was a Pinkerton agent. Got too close to Crane's operation in Colorado." Kate's hands clenched on her reins. "They found his body in a ravine. Said he fell from his horse. Sound familiar?" Sarah drew a sharp breath. "It's Crane's signature. Makes it look like an accident. Keeps the law from asking questions." Kate turned to her. "But Thomas left notes. Hidden, like your husband did. Took me months to piece together what he'd found." "And what did he find?" "That Crane isn't just a criminal. He's building an empire. Land, water rights, railroads. Everything the West needs to grow, he wants to control." Kate's voice dropped. "Mercer is just one piece. There are others like him in every territory. All answering to Crane." Grace stirred on the wagon seat, her small voice cutting through the cold air. "The spider in the web. That's what I see in my dreams. He sits in the middle and pulls the strings." Kate looked at the child sharply. "What did you say?" "She sees things," Sarah said quietly. "Before they happen. We don't fully understand it, but she's never been wrong." "Daniel's daughter." Kate's expression softened. "Thomas mentioned him in his notes. Said Daniel Holloway was the best agent Treasury ever had. Said if anyone could bring Crane down, it was him. He died trying." Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Then we finish what he started." Kate straightened in her saddle. "There's an old mining camp about 4 hours east. Abandoned now, but the buildings are solid. We can rest there. Plan our next move." Caleb nodded. "Lead the way." They traveled in tense silence as darkness fell. Grace fell asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhausted from the day's revelations. Josiah drifted in and out of consciousness in the wagon bed, his breathing shallow but steady. Sarah drove with grim determination, her eyes fixed on the trail ahead. But Caleb noticed how her hands trembled on the reins. How she kept glancing back at Grace, checking, reassuring herself. He brought his horse alongside the wagon. "You should rest. Let Kate drive for a while." "I can't rest. Not until we're somewhere safe." "Sarah." "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't tell me everything's going to be fine. Don't promise things you can't guarantee." "I wasn't going to." She looked at him, then, surprise flickering across her tired face. "What were you going to say?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I was going to say that you're the strongest person I've ever met, that your daughter is braver than men twice her age, and that whatever happens next, you should be proud of what you've done." Sarah's eyes glistened. "What I've done is put my child in danger. What you've done is fight for justice, for your husband's memory, for your daughter's future." Caleb held her gaze. "That's not something to be ashamed of. And if we fail, then we fail fighting. But at least we don't fail hiding." Sarah was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Daniel used to say something like that. He said the only real failure was giving up." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You would have liked him." "I think I would have." "He would have liked you too." Sarah's hand briefly touched his. "He would have trusted you. And he didn't trust easily." Before Caleb could respond, Kate's voice cut through the darkness. "Camp's just ahead. I'll check if it's clear." She disappeared into the shadows. Minutes later, a lantern flickered in the distance, signaling safety. They'd made it. For now. The mining camp was rough but serviceable. Kate had already started a fire in the largest building's stone fireplace by the time they got Josiah settled. Grace woke briefly, looked around with blurry eyes, then curled up on a bedroll near the warmth. "We need to talk strategy." Kate's voice was low as she spread a map across the floor. Denver's 4 days out, and Crane knows we're coming. How can you be sure? Sarah asked. Because he always knows. That's what makes him dangerous. Kate weighted down the corners of the map with stones. The main roads will be watched, but there's another way. Through the mountain passes. Harder, slower, but virtually invisible. Caleb studied the map. Those passes are treacherous in winter. One wrong step and we go over a cliff. Better a cliff than Crane's men. There has to be another way. There isn't. Kate's voice was hard. I've been running from these people for 2 years, Thornton. I know every road, every trail, every hiding place between here and California. This is the only route that gives us a chance. Sarah knelt beside the map, her finger tracing the mountain road. What about Grace? She's just a child. Those passes would be hard enough for grown men. Your daughter is stronger than you think. Kate met Sarah's eyes. I've seen what she can do, what she knows. You can protect her or you can prepare her. You can't do both. The words hung in the air, heavy with uncomfortable truth. Sarah rose abruptly, moving to check on Grace. Kate watched her go, then turned to Caleb. I said something wrong. You said something true. Sometimes that's worse. She's scared. She's been scared for 14 months, ever since they murdered her husband. Caleb kept his voice low. She spent all that time believing she lost Daniel to an accident. Now she knows it was murder. Now she's running for her life with a wounded man and a child who sees things that shouldn't be possible. Give her time. Time's the one thing we don't have much of. Then we make do with what we've got. Morning came with bitter cold and clear skies. They ate a sparse breakfast, checked the horses, prepared to move. Josiah was stronger today, able to sit up on his own, though his face remained gray with pain. I'll slow you down, he said, as Caleb helped him into the wagon. Should leave me here. Come back when it's safe. Not a chance. Caleb settled him against the grain sacks. You made a promise to Daniel, to protect his family. I'm holding you to that promise. The old man's eyes glistened. Stubborn fool. Takes one to know one. They set off as the sun cleared the eastern peaks. Kate led them off the main trail within an hour onto a narrow path that climbed steadily into the mountains. The going was slow, treacherous, exactly as Caleb had feared. But Grace seemed to sense the danger before it appeared. Stop, she would say suddenly, and moments later, loose rocks would tumble from above. Go left, she would whisper, and the right path would crumble away beneath their weight. By midday, even Kate was looking at the child with something close to awe. How does she do it? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I've stopped questioning and started listening. Smart? Kate shook her head. My grandmother always said the sight was a gift from the land itself, that some people are born connected to something older, deeper. Maybe that's what your daughter has. Or maybe she's just a frightened child trying to make sense of a senseless world. Maybe both. Kate managed a grim smile. The two aren't mutually exclusive. They reached a narrow ridge by late afternoon. The path here was barely wide enough for the wagon, with a sheer drop on one side and a rock wall on the other. Caleb dismounted, leading his horse on foot, every step deliberate. Easy, easy now. They were halfway across when Grace screamed. Caleb spun around. The wagon had stopped. Sarah was standing on the seat, rifle raised, aimed at something behind them. Don't move, Thornton. The voice came from the rock wall. A man emerged from a hidden crevice, pistol drawn. Then another, then 3 more. And behind them, stepping out of shadow like a nightmare made flesh, was a man Caleb had never seen before. Average height, average build. Nothing remarkable about him at all, except his eyes. They were pale gray, almost colorless, and they held nothing. No anger, no fear, no humanity, just cold, calculating emptiness. Marshal Thornton. The man's voice was pleasant, Conversational. Wrong. Or should I say, former Marshal Thornton. We meet at last. Caleb's hand moved toward his revolver. I wouldn't. The man gestured casually, and his men's weapons clicked in unison. You're fast. I've heard the stories, but not faster than 5 bullets. Ezekiel Crane. In the flesh. Crane smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Though I go by Elijah Morrison these days. Has a more respectable ring to it, don't you think? What do you want? The same thing I've wanted for 3 years. Daniel Holloway's evidence. The papers your lovely companion is carrying in that satchel. Sarah's face went white. Her hand pressed against the bag at her side. How did you know? I know everything, Mrs. Holloway. Crane's smile widened. I knew when your husband started investigating me. I knew when he found my connections to Mercer. I knew when he hid his evidence on your property. The smile turned cruel. I even knew when he visited you in your daughter's dreams. Grace made a small sound of terror. Ah, yes, the child. Crane's colorless gaze shifted to her. The one who sees truth. Your husband's final gift to the world. He tilted his head, studying her like a specimen under glass. She's the real prize, you know. The evidence can be destroyed, but a child who can see the future, that's invaluable. You stay away from her. Sarah's voice shook with fury. Or what? You'll shoot me. Crane spread his arms. Go ahead. My men will kill you all before my body hits the ground, including your precious daughter. Silence fell, broken only by the wind and Grace's quiet crying. Caleb's mind raced. 5 men plus Crane. No cover, no room to maneuver. Sarah had the rifle. Kate had her pistol. But they were outgunned and outpositioned. He needed time. Needed Crane talking. You've gone to a lot of trouble to find us, following us through the mountains, waiting in ambush. Caleb kept his voice steady. Why not just kill us at the trading post or the mining camp? Crane's eyebrow rose slightly. Because I wanted to meet you, Marshal, face to face, man to man. He took a step closer. Do you know how close you came to catching me 5 years ago? Another day, maybe 2, and you would have had me. But I didn't. No, you didn't. Crane's smile turned cruel. Because I gave you something better to chase. A false lead. A phantom trail. And while you were running in circles, your wife and daughter. Caleb's vision went red. His hand moved before his mind could stop it. The gunshot was deafening. Crane staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. His men opened fire. Caleb dove behind a boulder as bullets sparked off stone around him. He heard Sarah scream, heard Kate return fire, heard the chaos of combat in a space too small for escape. Grace! Sarah's voice rose above the gunfire. Grace, get down! Caleb peered around the boulder. 2 of Crane's men were down. Kate had taken cover behind the wagon, trading shots with a third. Sarah was shielding Grace with her body, the rifle useless at this range. And Crane was gone. Where is he? Caleb shouted. Where did he go? Kate didn't answer. She was too busy trying not to die. Caleb made a decision. He broke from cover, running toward the wagon, firing as he went. One of Crane's men fell. Another spun, taking aim. A shot rang out from an unexpected direction. The man dropped. Josiah stood in the wagon bed, pistol smoking, his wounded arm braced against the sideboards. Still got some fight left, the old man said grimly. Now go find that snake. Caleb ran. The path beyond the ridge descended into a narrow canyon. Crane couldn't have gone far, not with a bullet in his shoulder. Caleb found blood drops in the snow, a clear trail leading deeper into the rocks. He followed, around a bend. The canyon opened into a small clearing. Crane stood in the center, his back to a sheer cliff face. Nowhere to run. Impressive! Crane's voice was strained with pain. You're everything the stories said. Caleb raised his revolver. It's over. Is it? Crane laughed, a wet, ugly sound. You think killing me changes anything? I'm one-man Thornton. One piece of a machine that spans the entire West. Cut off the head, and another grows back. Then I'll cut that one off too. Will you for how long? A year? 2 forever. Crane's colorless eyes glittered. You can't protect them forever. The woman, the child. Sooner or later my associates will find them, and when they do, you'll be dead, you won't see it. No, but I'll die knowing it's coming. Crane smiled, blood staining his teeth. That's victory enough. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Mr. Caleb, don't. He turned. Grace stood at the canyon entrance, her small face pale, her eyes filled with something Caleb had never seen there before. Not fear, not sorrow. Certainty. He wants you to kill him. If you do, you become like him. And you can't come back from that. Grace? I saw it. Both ways. She stepped closer, her voice steady despite her trembling. One path, you pull that trigger, and you spend the rest of your life in darkness. The other path, she met his eyes. You don't. And we're together. All of us. For a long, long time. Crane laughed again. The child's gift. How touching. Shut up. Caleb's voice was deadly. You don't get to talk to her. Or what? You'll kill me. Crane spread his arms. Do it. Prove me right. Show her what you really are. The temptation was overwhelming. 4 years of grief. 4 years of guilt. 4 years of knowing this man had destroyed everything Caleb loved. One bullet would end it. But Grace's eyes held his, trusting, believing, seeing something in him that he'd stopped believing existed. Caleb lowered the gun. You're not worth losing them. His voice was rough, broken. You're not worth losing myself. Crane's smile faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in those dead eyes. You'll regret this. Maybe. But I'll regret it alive. With them. Footsteps behind him. Sarah appeared, Kate close behind, both women armed and ready. It's over, Sarah said. We heard everything. Not quite over. Kate moved forward, producing a pair of iron shackles from her saddlebag. Ezekiel Crane, you're under arrest for the murders of Thomas Sullivan, Daniel Holloway, and God knows how many others. You'll face trial in Denver, and then you'll hang. Crane's expression went blank. The calculating mind behind those colorless eyes was already working, already planning, already searching for escape. But there was nowhere to run. Not this time. Get him secured, Caleb said. We still have a long way to go. They returned to the ridge to find the battle finished. Josiah sat in the wagon bed, exhausted but alive. The remaining outlaws had fled when their leader disappeared. No one had followed. Is it over? The old man asked, his voice thin with pain. Caleb looked at Crane, shackled and bleeding, held between Kate and one of the captured men's horses. At Sarah, holding Grace close. At the long road still stretching before them. Not yet, but we're close. They made camp that night in a sheltered valley. Grace fell asleep, quickly drained by the day's events. Josiah was soon snoring softly, his body finally surrendering to the rest it desperately needed. Kate volunteered for first watch, leaving Caleb and Sarah alone by the dying fire. You didn't kill him. Sarah's voice was soft, almost wondering. No. Why not? Caleb stared into the flames. Because Grace asked me not to. He paused, searching for words that felt impossibly heavy. And because I'm tired of being the man who destroys things. I want to be the man who builds them. Sarah moved closer. Her shoulder touched his. Warm, solid, real. Daniel would have been proud of you. What you did out there. I almost didn't do it. Almost pulled that trigger. But you didn't. Sarah's hand found his in the darkness. That's what matters. You chose us. You chose life. I chose you. The words came out before Caleb could stop them. You and Grace. That's what I chose. Sarah's breath caught. In the firelight, her eyes were deep and dark, filled with something that looked terrifyingly like hope. Caleb, you don't have to. I know. He turned to face her fully. I know it's too soon. I know you loved Daniel. I'm not trying to replace him. Nobody could. But that doesn't mean there's no room for someone else. Doesn't mean I can't. She didn't let him finish. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, her fingers intertwining with his. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire die, holding on to each other against the cold and the dark and all the uncertainty still waiting for them. Tomorrow would bring more danger, more miles, more battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Caleb Thornton didn't feel alone. And that he realized was worth more than revenge could ever be. Denver rose from the plains like a promise. 4 days of hard travel through mountain passes, sleeping in shifts, watching Crane every moment. 4 days of tension wound so tight Caleb felt it might snap at any second. But they'd made it. Kate led them through the city's back streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Mercer's associates might be watching. The federal courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade solid and imposing against the winter sky. Judge Hollister's chambers are on the 2nd floor, Kate said quietly. I sent word ahead through a contact I trust. He's expecting us. And if your contact was wrong, Sarah asked, if Hollister's been compromised too, then we're dead. Kate's voice was flat, honest. But Thomas trusted Hollister. Daniel trusted Hollister. At some point, we have to believe in something. Crane laughed from the back of the wagon where he sat shackled between 2 federal deputies Kate had recruited along the way. Belief, the last refuge of the desperate. Shut up. Caleb didn't bother looking at him. Have I said something wrong? I haven't even started. Crane's colorless eyes found Grace, who sat pressed against her mother's side. The child knows what's coming. Don't you, little one, you've seen it. The truth they don't want to hear. Grace's face went pale. Don't listen to him, Mama. He's lying. He's always lying. Am I? Crane smiled that empty smile. Ask her about the fire, Mrs. Holloway. Ask her what she saw in her dreams last night. Sarah turned to her daughter. Grace? The girl's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to say. I didn't want to scare you. Tell me. Grace's chin trembled. The courthouse. I saw it burning. And there were men inside, waiting for us. The words hit like a physical blow. Kate pulled her horse to a stop. How many men? I don't know. A lot. Grace looked at Caleb, her face crumpling with guilt and fear. They knew we were coming. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I wanted so badly for it to be over. Caleb's mind raced. If Crane's associates had infiltrated the courthouse, walking in the front door was suicide. But turning back meant giving up everything they'd fought for. Is there another way in? Service door on the east side. Kate's expression was grim. Used for deliveries, but if they're expecting us, they'll be watching that too. Not necessarily. Caleb turned to Sarah. Take Grace and Josiah to the hotel on 5th Street. The one Kate mentioned earlier. Wait there. No. Sarah's voice was fierce. We stay together. Sarah, I said no. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in hard. I'm not losing anyone else. Not today. Not ever again. You won't lose me. You don't know that. No. Caleb covered her hand with his. But I know that if I don't go in there, Crane's people win. Daniel's evidence never reaches the judge. Your husband died for nothing. He met her eyes. I can't let that happen. I won't. Sarah's gaze searched his face. Whatever she saw there made her release her grip, but her voice shook when she spoke. "Come back to me. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her forehead, brief, tender, a vow sealed without words. Then he turned to Grace. "Keep your mama safe, little miss. Can you do that?" Grace nodded, her eyes still glistening with tears. "I saw something else too, Mr. Caleb. Something I didn't tell him." "What?" "You win." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "It's hard and scary, but you win." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. "That's good enough for me." Kate had already dismounted, checking her pistol. "Ready. As I'll ever be." They approached the courthouse from the east. The service door was unguarded, suspiciously unguarded, just as Kate had feared. She produced a key from her pocket and unlocked it. "Thomas gave me this before he died. Said someday I might need to get in without being seen." They slipped inside. The corridor was dim and narrow, lined with storage rooms and supply closets. Voices echoed from somewhere above, too distant to make out words. "Hollister's chambers are on the second floor," Kate whispered. "We need to get past the main hall." They moved quietly, hugging the walls, avoiding open doorways. They reached the stairwell without incident. Kate started up, Caleb close behind. Halfway to the second floor, a floorboard creaked. Kate froze. Caleb pressed himself against the wall, footsteps above, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. "Someone's there," a voice called out. "Check the stairs." Caleb and Kate burst from the stairwell just as two armed men appeared on the landing above. Caleb fired twice, dropped one. Kate took the other before he could get a shot off. More shouts, more footsteps. The element of surprise was gone. "Run!" Caleb grabbed Kate's arm, pulling her down the corridor. "Hollister's office, now!" They sprinted through the maze of hallways, following Kate's memory of the building's layout. Behind them, pursuit grew louder. A door appeared ahead. Kate reached it first, throwing it open. An elderly man sat behind a massive desk, white hair disheveled, eyes wide with alarm. "Judge Hollister." Kate was already pulling documents from her satchel. "Daniel Holloway's evidence. Everything you need to bring down Ezekiel Crane and his entire operation." Hollister stood, moved toward them. "Catherine Sullivan, Thomas's sister. I know who you are." His eyes shifted to Caleb. "And you must be Marcus Thornton, former U.S. Marshal. I've heard the stories." "Then you know why we're here." "I do." Hollister's voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd faced danger before and survived. "I have men I trust. They're waiting in the north wing. This way, quickly." He led them through a private passage. The sounds of pursuit faded behind them. The passage opened into a small courtroom where 6 armed men in federal uniforms waited. "Judge," one of them stepped forward. "What's happening?" "Arrest everyone in this building who isn't supposed to be here," Hollister ordered. "And send word to the territorial governor. Ezekiel Crane is in custody. We have evidence of conspiracy murder and corruption at the highest levels." The marshals moved with impressive efficiency. Within an hour, the courthouse was secured. Crane's infiltrators were in custody. Kate's evidence was being cataloged and verified, and Caleb stood at a window watching the chaos subside, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. "Mr. Thornton?" He turned. Judge Hollister approached the document still clutched in his weathered hands. "These papers are extraordinary. Daniel Holloway built an airtight case. With this evidence, we can dismantle Crane's entire network." "That was always the plan." "There's something else." Hollister hesitated. "Among the documents, there's a letter, addressed to Mrs. Holloway and her daughter, written by Daniel just days before his death." A weight pressed down on Caleb's shoulders. "From Daniel." The judge produced a sealed envelope. I think you should be the one to give it to them." Caleb took the envelope. It was lighter than he'd expected, just paper and ink, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Thank you, Judge." "No, Mr. Thornton, thank you." Hollister's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What you've done here today. Daniel would be proud." "I hope so. I know so." The judge clasped his shoulder. "Now go. Your family is waiting." Your family. The words echoed in Caleb's mind as he left the courthouse, stepping into the bright afternoon light. He found Sarah and Grace at the hotel on 5th Street, exactly where he'd asked them to wait. Sarah saw him first. She rose from her chair, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes searching his face for signs of injury. "Caleb, it's over." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "It's over, Sarah. We did it." She clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I was so scared. When we heard the gunshots." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be alive." She pulled back her hands, framing his face. "You're really alive." "Really alive." Grace appeared beside them, her small face radiant with relief. "I told you, Mama. I saw it. He was always going to come back." Caleb knelt down, opening his arms. Grace threw herself into them without hesitation. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for believing, for seeing, for everything." "Thank you for listening." Grace pulled back her solemn gaze, meeting his. "Nobody ever listened before. Not really. I'll always listen. I promise." Sarah joined them, and for a long moment the 3 of them simply held each other. A family forged through fire and fear and faith. Finally, Caleb remembered the envelope in his pocket. "There's something else." He produced Daniel's letter. Judge Hollister found this among the documents. It's from Daniel. Sarah's breath caught. Her fingers shook as she took the envelope. Should we read it now?" "That's up to you." Sarah looked at Grace. The girl nodded solemnly. With shaking fingers, Sarah broke the seal. The letter was 2 pages written in Daniel's careful handwriting. Sarah read aloud, her voice breaking at every line. "My dearest Sarah and Grace, if you're reading this, then I've gone to be with the Lord. Please don't grieve too long. I knew the risks when I started this journey, and I accepted them. Because some things are worth dying for. Truth, justice, the future I wanted to give you both." Sarah's voice wavered, but she continued. "Sarah, you are the strongest woman I have ever known. Don't let my death make you weak. Let it make you stronger. Raise our daughter to know right from wrong. Teach her to fight for what matters. And when the time comes," Sarah's voice cracked, "when the time comes, let yourself love again. I want that for you. I need you to promise me that." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she kept reading. "Grace, my little dreamer, you have a gift that most people will never understand. Don't be afraid of it. Don't hide from it. The things you see are real. The things you feel are true. Trust yourself, always. I love you both more than words can say. Watch for me in the stars. I'll be watching for you. Forever yours, Daniel." Silence fell. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Grace leaned against her mother, crying softly. Caleb stood apart, feeling like an intruder on their private grief. But Sarah reached for him, pulled him close. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew you'd come. Somehow. He told me to love again. In his letter." Her voice broke. "He told me to let myself. He gave me permission, Caleb. He wanted me to find you." "Sarah, you don't know that." "I do." Her eyes, bright with tears, met his. "Grace knew you were coming before you arrived. Daniel knew I'd need someone after he was gone. Maybe the people who love us see further than we think." Caleb had no answer for that, no words that could capture what he felt, so he simply held her, held them both, let the tears fall, and for the first time in 4 years, he could breathe again without the weight of grief crushing his lungs. The trial of Ezekiel Crane began 3 weeks later. Caleb testified for 2 full days, laying out everything he knew about Crane's operations, his connections to Mercer, his role in the deaths of Daniel Holloway, Thomas Sullivan, and countless others. Kate testified too. So did Josiah, recovered enough to travel his voice steady as he recounted years of investigation and near misses. But it was Sarah's testimony that changed everything. She stood before the packed courtroom. Daniel's evidence spread across the prosecution's table, and she spoke about her husband, about the man he'd been, the father, the agent, the hero. Daniel Holloway died because he believed the truth mattered, because he refused to look away when powerful men did evil things. Her voice rang clear and strong, and he died believing that someday justice would prevail. She turned to face Crane directly. Today it does. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Crane was sentenced to hang. As they led him from the courtroom, he caught Caleb's eye. For a moment, something flickered in that colorless gaze. Fear, maybe. Or rage. Then it was gone, replaced by that empty, calculating stare. "This isn't over, Thornton." "Maybe. But you are." Crane disappeared through the courtroom doors. Caleb never saw him again. Later that evening, Sarah found him standing alone on the courthouse steps. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "It's really finished," she said softly, moving to stand beside him. "Crane's finished. Mercer's finished." Caleb turned to face her. "But we're just beginning." Sarah's eyes searched his. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been thinking." He took her hands in his. "About what comes next. About where I want to be. Who I want to be with." "Caleb, let me finish." He drew a breath, steadied himself. 4 years ago, I lost everything. My wife, my daughter, my purpose. I've been running ever since. Running from the pain, running from the guilt, running from anything that might make me feel again. Sarah's hands tightened around his, silent, waiting. "Then I found you, and Grace, and Josiah." His voice roughened. "You weren't looking for a hero. You weren't looking for anyone. But you gave me something I'd forgotten I needed. A reason to stop running. A reason to stay." "We needed you too." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "More than you know." Daniel's letter. Caleb met her eyes. "He told you to love again. He gave you permission to be happy. I want to be that happiness, Sarah, if you'll let me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I thought you'd never ask." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Full of everything they'd almost lost, and everything they'd found. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was standing in the doorway behind them. A knowing smile on her small face. "I told you, Mama." Her voice was full of quiet satisfaction. "I saw it. A long time ago." Sarah laughed through her tears. "You did, sweetheart. You absolutely did." "So we're a family now?" Grace asked, stepping forward. "A real one." Caleb knelt down to meet her eyes. "If that's what you want, little miss. I know I can never replace your papa. You're not replacing him." Grace reached out her small hand, touching his cheek. "You're adding to him. That's different." She smiled. "Papa would have liked you. He told me so." "He told you? In my dreams. He said a good man was coming. A man who lost everything, but found his way back." Grace's old young eyes held his. "He said to trust you. So I did." Caleb's throat tightened. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Sarah's hand found his shoulder. Warm, steady, home. "Come on," she said softly. "Josiah's waiting at the hotel, and I believe someone promised me a future worth fighting for." They walked together into the fading light, Grace between them, hands intertwined. Behind them, the courthouse stood silent, a monument to justice served, to truth revealed, to evil finally held to account. Ahead of them, the road stretched on, unknown, uncertain, but they would face it together, and that Caleb realized was all the promise he needed. Spring came early that year. The snow began melting 3 weeks after the trial ended. Rivers swelled with fresh water. The first green shoots pushed through frozen ground, and Caleb Thornton stood on the porch of a small cabin in Colorado, watching Grace run through a meadow dotted with wildflowers that had somehow survived the winter. Sarah worked in the garden nearby, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her hands deep in rich soil, humming a song Caleb didn't recognize but already loved. They'd come to his family ranch 2 weeks after Crane's sentencing, the place where Margaret and Rose were buried, the place Caleb had sworn he'd never return to. But Grace had asked. She'd seen it in one of her dreams, had insisted this was where they needed to be. The sad place, she'd called it. But it doesn't have to stay sad. It can be happy again. So they'd come. And slowly, painfully, it was becoming true. Mr. Caleb. Grace came running toward the porch, clutching something in her small hands. "Look what I found." She held up a cluster of wildflowers, purple and yellow and white tangled together like they'd grown that way. "They were by the stones, the ones where your wife and daughter sleep." Her voice softened. "I thought maybe they'd like if we put these in the house, so they know we're taking care of things." Caleb's throat tightened. He knelt down, taking the flowers gently. "I think they'd like that very much." Grace beamed. "Mama says dinner's almost ready. She says you need to wash up or you'll get the look." "The look? You know." Grace giggled. "The one where she's pretending to be mad but she's really just worried." Caleb smiled. "I know that look well." "I like it when she gives you that look." Grace leaned closer, whispering conspiratorially. "It means she loves you." "Does it now?" "Uh-huh." Grace straightened up suddenly. Serious. "Mr. Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you going to marry Mama?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Caleb looked toward the garden, where Sarah was brushing dirt from her hands, turning toward the cabin. Her eyes found his across the distance. And she smiled. That smile. "Would that be okay with you?" he asked Grace. "If I did, more than okay." The girl's eyes sparkled with that ancient knowing he'd come to trust. "I saw it, Mr. Caleb, a long time ago, even before you came. I saw us together, a family." "What else did you see?" Grace grinned. "A brother. But don't tell Mama yet. She doesn't know." Caleb laughed. The sound surprised him. How long had it been since he'd laughed like that? Too long. Far too long. Sarah reached the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's so funny?" "Nothing." Caleb stood offering her the wildflowers. "Grace found these. Thought we should put them in the house." Sarah's expression softened as she took the flowers. "They're beautiful." She looked at her daughter. "Where did you find them?" "By the graves, where Margaret and Rose sleep." Grace's voice was matter-of-fact, peaceful. "They want us to be happy, Mama. I can feel it." Sarah's eyes glistened. She pulled Grace close, pressing a kiss to her dark hair. "Then we will be. We'll be happy for them, and for us." That evening, after dinner, after Grace had gone to bed with stories and songs, Caleb and Sarah sat together on the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Daniel's letter," Sarah said softly. "He told me to love again." "I remember. I wasn't sure I could, after everything, after losing him the way I did." She turned to face Caleb. "But then you came, out of a storm, carrying Josiah, looking like you'd lost everything, but didn't know how to stop fighting." "I had lost everything." "I know." Sarah's hand found his. "So had I. Maybe that's why we fit." "Maybe." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Or maybe the people who love us don't really leave. Maybe they just find ways to keep helping, even from wherever they are." Sarah smiled. "I think you might be right." "I usually am." She squeezed his hand. "Ask Grace. She'll tell you." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "Sarah?" "Yes." "Ask me." His heart stuttered. "Ask you what?" "You know what." Sarah's eyes were bright in the starlight. "Grace already told me. She gave you permission. Said you'd been thinking about it all day." "That girl sees too much." "She sees exactly enough." Sarah squeezed his hand. "So ask me." Caleb turned to face her fully. This woman who had held a shotgun on him the night they met, who had trusted him with her daughter, her secrets, her heart, who had walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. Sarah Holloway. His voice was rough with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Her answer was a kiss, deep and true, tasting of tears and hope, and something that felt remarkably like forever. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." From somewhere inside the cabin, Grace's voice drifted through an open window. "Finally, I've been waiting forever for you two." Sarah buried her face in Caleb's shoulder, her body shaking with laughter. He held her close, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I love you," he said. "Both of you. More than I knew I could." "I love you too." Sarah lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. "And Daniel loves you for giving us this. For being brave enough to start over." "We started over together." "Yes." She kissed him again, soft and sweet. "Together." Above them, the stars burned on. And somewhere in that vast and endless sky, Caleb could have sworn he heard laughter. Margaret's laughter, Rose's laughter, Daniel's too, the people they'd lost, celebrating the people they'd found. The wedding was small, just family and the few friends they'd made since arriving in Colorado. Josiah stood as Caleb's witness, his wounded arm finally healed, his eyes suspiciously bright as he watched the ceremony. Kate Sullivan had traveled from Cheyenne to attend, her red hair tamed into an elegant knot, her smile genuine as she congratulated them. "Thomas would have loved this," she whispered to Sarah. "He always said Daniel deserved a happy ending. I think this counts." Grace served as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn concentration, her best dress swirling around her ankles as she walked. The minister was a young man from the nearest town, nervous about performing his first wedding. But his voice steadied as the vows were exchanged. "Do you, Caleb Thornton, take this woman to be your wife? To have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Caleb looked at Sarah, at the woman who had given him a reason to stop running, a reason to live again. "I do." "And do you, Sarah Holloway, take this man to be your husband? To have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Sarah's voice was clear and strong. "I do." Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The minister smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Caleb did, and when he pulled back, Grace was there, throwing her arms around both of them. "We're a real family now," she said, her voice muffled against their embrace. "A forever family." "Forever," Sarah agreed, her voice thick with tears. "Forever," Caleb echoed. And he meant it with every broken, healing piece of his heart. The months that followed were the happiest Caleb had known in years. He worked the ranch alongside Sarah and Grace, rebuilding what had fallen into disrepair during his years of absence, planting new crops, mending fences, making the land productive again. Grace thrived. Her nightmares came less frequently now. And when they did, she no longer woke screaming. She would come to Caleb and Sarah's room, climb into their bed, and talk about what she'd seen. "Papa visited me again last night," she told them one morning over breakfast. "He said to tell you he's proud, both of you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "What else did he say?" "That the baby is going to be healthy, and that I should help name him." Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "The baby." Grace nodded matter-of-factly. "Didn't Mama tell you yet? She's going to today. I saw it." She returned to her eggs. "I think we should name him Daniel, after Papa. Is that okay?" Caleb looked at Sarah. Sarah's face had gone pale, her hand pressed against her stomach. "I was going to tell you tonight," she whispered. "I wasn't sure. I wanted to be certain before." Caleb was out of his chair in an instant, crossing to her side, taking her hands in his. "A baby." Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Is this okay? I know it's soon. I know we haven't." "Okay." Caleb pulled her into his arms. "Sarah, this is more than okay. This is everything." Grace watched them with satisfaction. "I told you. I saw it months ago. A little boy with Mama's eyes and your stubborn chin, Mr. Caleb." "You might want to start calling him Papa," Sarah said, laughing through her tears. "If he's going to be your brother's father." Grace considered this. "Papa Caleb. I like it." "Just Caleb is fine." "Papa Caleb," Grace repeated firmly. "That's what the baby will call you. So that's what I'll call you too." Caleb looked at this child who had changed everything. This small, fierce girl who saw truth when the rest of the world was blind. "Papa Caleb it is then." Grace smiled. "Good. Now can I be excused? I promised to help Josiah with the horses." "Go on." She ran out, leaving Caleb and Sarah alone. "A baby." Sarah's voice was wondering. "A new life. After everything." "After everything," Caleb agreed. He kissed her forehead. "Daniel's letter. He told you to be happy. I think this counts." "I think so too." Sarah pressed closer to him. "I never thought I could feel this way again. After losing Daniel, after everything we went through. But here we are. Here we are. Together. Together." Sarah looked up at him. Her eyes were clear now, peaceful in a way he'd rarely seen. "I had a dream last night too. Not like Grace's dreams, just a normal dream. But Daniel was there." Caleb held her tighter. "What did he say?" "He said thank you, for taking care of us, for giving Grace a father again." Sarah's voice caught. "And he said his job was done now, that he could rest, that he didn't need to watch over us anymore because you would." "I will." Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "I promise, Sarah. I will." "I know." She smiled up at him. "I've always known. From that first night when you carried Josiah through the storm, when you saved him, even though you didn't have to. I knew then that you were different." "Different how?" "Good different." Sarah reached up, touching his face. "Broken like me, but still trying, still fighting, still believing that things could get better even when they seemed hopeless." "I didn't believe that. Not then. But you do now." Caleb thought about the past year, about everything he'd lost and everything he'd found, about the graves in the meadow and the life growing in Sarah's belly, about Grace's visions and Daniel's letter and the family he'd never expected to have again. "Yeah," he said softly, "I do now." Summer turned to fall. Fall surrendered to winter. And in the coldest month of the year, exactly 1 year after Caleb had stumbled out of a blizzard and into Sarah's life, their son was born. They named him Daniel. Daniel Thornton. Grace had been right about everything. The baby had Sarah's dark eyes and Caleb's stubborn chin. He was healthy and strong and had a set of lungs that could wake the dead. "He's perfect," Sarah whispered, cradling her son against her chest. "He's absolutely perfect." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Sarah, one hand gently stroking his son's downy head. "He is." Grace peered over his shoulder, her face alight with wonder. "He's so small. Was I ever that small?" "Smaller," Sarah said with a tired smile. "You were early, and so determined to meet the world that you didn't wait for the doctor." "I'm still determined." Grace reached out, letting the baby grip her finger. "Hello, Daniel. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. How to ride, how to read, how to see things." "See things?" Caleb asked. "Mama says sometimes the gift runs in families. Maybe Daniel will have it too." Grace looked up at him. "Would that be okay, if he could see things like me?" Caleb thought about all the pain Grace's gift had caused her. The years of being disbelieved. The weight of knowing things no child should have to know. But he also thought about how that gift had saved them, had led them to Daniel's evidence, had warned them about Crane, had shown Grace that Caleb was coming long before he arrived. "Yeah," he said finally. "That would be okay, as long as we listen, as long as we believe him." Grace smiled. "You always listen. That's what makes you different." "Different from who?" "From everyone else." Grace leaned against him, her voice soft. "Most people don't listen. Not really. They hear words, but they don't listen to what's underneath. You do. You always have. That's why Papa sent you to us." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "You think Daniel sent me?" "I know he did." Grace's old young eyes met his. "I saw it. The night before you came, I saw Papa standing in the snow pointing toward our farm, and behind him, walking through the storm, was you." Caleb didn't know what to say. Sarah reached out, taking his hand, squeezing gently. "I believe her," Sarah said quietly. "I believe Daniel is still watching over us, and I believe he brought you to us exactly when we needed you most. Even if it's not logical." "Love isn't logical," Sarah smiled. "Neither is family. We just are. We just exist. We just hold on to each other and hope for the best." Baby Daniel made a small sound. A coo of contentment as he nestled against his mother's warmth. "He agrees," Grace announced. "He says we're the best family he could have asked for." "You can understand him already." "Not understand exactly. More like feel." Grace shrugged. "It's hard to explain." "You don't have to explain." Caleb pulled her into a one-armed hug. "You just have to be you. That's always been enough." "Really? Really?" Grace was quiet for a moment. Then, "Papa Caleb." "Yeah. I'm glad you came out of that storm. I'm glad you found us." Caleb held her tighter, looked at Sarah, at baby Daniel, at the family he'd never expected and couldn't imagine living without. "So am I, little miss. So am I." Later that night, after Grace had gone to bed, and Sarah was sleeping peacefully with Daniel in the cradle beside her, Caleb stood at the window. The stars were out, brilliant against the winter sky. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The fever that took Margaret and Rose. The years of running. The storm that killed his horse and led him to Sarah's farm. The choices he'd made. The ones he'd almost made. If he'd pulled that trigger in the canyon, if he'd killed Crane when he had the chance, would he still be standing here? Would he have this family, this future? He didn't think so. Grace had been right. That choice would have changed him, would have sent him down a path of darkness he couldn't return from. Instead, he'd chosen mercy, chosen life, chosen love. And here he was. "You're thinking too loud." He turned. Sarah was watching him from the bed, her eyes soft with sleepiness. "Sorry. Did I wake you?" "Daniel did. He wanted to eat." She smiled. "But I don't mind. Come back to bed." Caleb crossed the room, slid under the covers beside her. Sarah curled against him, her head on his shoulder. "What were you thinking about?" "Everything, nothing." He kissed her hair. "How different things could have been. How glad I am they're not." "Different how?" "I almost didn't come down that ridge. When I heard Grace calling for help, I almost kept walking." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I think about that sometimes. What would have happened if I'd kept walking? If I'd let the storm take me like I wanted to? What do you think would have happened?" "I'd be dead. And you and Grace." He couldn't finish. Sarah lifted her head, met his eyes. "But that's not what happened. You came down that ridge. You saved Josiah. You saved us." Her hand found his cheek. "And now you're here. With me. With our children. Alive. Because of Grace. Because she saw me coming. Maybe. Or maybe you were always supposed to find us. Maybe some things are meant to be." "You believe that?" Sarah smiled. "I believe in you. I believe in us. I believe that whatever brought us together, whether it was fate or Daniel's spirit, or just blind luck, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than Daniel. Different than Daniel." Sarah's voice was gentle. "I loved him. I will always love him. But he's gone. And you're here. And I've learned that the heart is bigger than we think. It can hold more love than we imagine." Caleb pulled her closer. "I love you, Sarah." "I know." She kissed him softly. "I love you too. Now stop thinking and go to sleep. Daniel will be awake again in a few hours, and you promised to take the early feeding." "I did. You did. Grace heard you." Caleb laughed quietly. "That girl hears everything. She sees everything too. Better get used to it." He was already used to it. Used to Grace's knowing looks. Used to Sarah's quiet strength. Used to the sound of a baby crying at 3 in the morning and the smell of coffee brewing at dawn. Used to being home. He'd spent 4 years running from death. Now, at last, he was running toward life. And as he drifted off to sleep with Sarah warm beside him and his son breathing softly in the cradle nearby, Caleb Thornton finally understood what Daniel had known all along. Some things are worth dying for, but more importantly, some things are worth living for. Family, love, a future built on the ashes of the past. That night, for the first time since Margaret and Rose had died, Caleb dreamed of them. But the dream wasn't sad. Margaret was laughing, her golden hair catching the sunlight. Rose was running through wildflowers just like she used to, and standing beside them smiling was a man Caleb had never met, but somehow recognized. Daniel Holloway. "Thank you," Daniel said. "For what?" Caleb asked. "For listening, for believing, for loving them when I couldn't anymore." Daniel's smile was warm, real, at peace. "Take care of them, Caleb. They're yours now." "I will." "I know." Daniel began to fade along with Margaret and Rose. "Tell Grace I'm proud of her. Tell Sarah I'll always be watching. And tell your son, when he's old enough to understand that names carry power. Daniel is a good name, a strong name. He'll do it justice." Then they were gone, and Caleb woke with tears on his cheeks, but a smile on his face. Sarah was already awake, watching him with knowing eyes. Good dream. The best. He pulled her close. The very best. Outside the window, the sun was rising over the Colorado mountains. A new day, a new beginning, and a love strong enough to survive anything. Caleb Thornton had spent 4 years running from his past, but now at last he had found his future, and he would never let it go.